Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into what is arguably the most mysterious, dangerous, and historically significant river on the planet. We're taking a journey right through the heart of Africa to understand a force of nature that didn't just shape a landscape, it literally shaped humanity itself.
So let me ask you a question. Imagine if all the water completely disappeared today. Every river, every lake, gone. How long would our civilization actually last? A few weeks? Maybe just a few days? Well, there's one river that hasn't just sustained human life for the last 10,000 years. It actually gave birth to human civilization. Without it, the map of the world as we know it would look completely different. We're talking no pharaohs, no pyramids, and honestly, human history as we know it probably wouldn't even exist.
You know, the Greek historian Herodotus really hit the nail on the head 2,500 years ago when he said, Egypt is the gift of the Nile. And he was absolutely right. Think about it. Over 95% of Egypt is this harsh, totally unforgiving desert. Without this single river, the entire country would be lifeless, just empty and barren. But instead, it became the cradle of an incredible empire. So just how big is this lifeline? Well, 6,650. That is the staggering length of the Nile River in kilometers. It's a geographical titan, literally slicing its way through 11 different African countries, including Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. But how does this magnificent, sprawling river actually come together? Okay, so here's the thing. The Nile doesn't just start in one place. It's actually got two main sources. First up, we have the White Nile, which emerges from the massive Lake Victoria in Uganda. And fun fact, that lake is so vast that early explorers actually thought it was an ocean. Then you have the Blue Nile, which originates from Lake Tana in Ethiopia. Now, here is the absolutely crucial part. It's the Blue Nile that brings in a whopping 85% of the water and the rich soil. These two incredible forces finally meet up in Khartoum, Sudan, to form the mighty Nile that we all know. Historically, the heavy annual rains in Ethiopia would cause the river to flood all the way down into Egypt, and when those waters finally receded, they left behind this deep, dark, incredibly nutrient-rich silt. The ancient Egyptians called this Kemet, or the Black Land. It was literally the ultimate farming jackpot that fed an entire civilization. But, that rich silt wasn't its only gift. The river was honestly the ultimate teacher. To predict those absolutely crucial annual floods, the Egyptians went ahead and invented the calendar. To measure all that flooded land, they developed advanced mathematics. To channel the water, they learned really complex engineering. And those great pyramids, they weren't just built by dragging stones across the sand. We're talking millions of tons of massive stone blocks transported on boats right up the Nile, completely without modern machinery. The river was so vital that they actually revered it as a god named Hapi. If Hapi didn't bring the flood, there was no food, and the empire collapses. Simple as that. That is exactly why the pharaohs drew their absolute power from claiming to be the magical guardians of this river. Section 1. Myths, monsters, and mysteries. 1,000 kilograms. That is the absolutely staggering weight of a fully grown Nile crocodile. Reaching up to 6 meters in length, this apex predator is faster in the water than any human and has the strongest bite force in the entire animal kingdom. It's so deadly, taking hundreds of lives in Africa every single year, that the ancient Egyptians quite literally worshipped it as Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of power and protection. But actually, surprise! The crocodile isn't the only monster lurking in these waters. 30 kilometers per hour. That is how fast a hippopotamus can swim. I know, despite its heavy, kind of sluggish appearance, the hippo is actually Africa's deadliest large mammal. They are highly territorial, incredibly aggressive, and can easily capsize boats. The Nile is this wild ecosystem that's just teeming with both incredible life and severe sudden danger. But the mysteries of the Nile are also deeply rooted in its geography. You see, the Nile famously flows backwards. Yep, most major rivers in the world flow from north to south, but the Nile stubbornly flows from south to north, completely defying what you might expect. Now, of course, the explanation is actually incredibly simple. Water flows downhill, right? The river's sources in the southern African highlands are just at a much higher elevation than its mouth at the Mediterranean Sea. But this simple little fact has confused explorers for millennia. Which brings us to one of the greatest mysteries in scientific history. Where exactly does the Nile actually begin? The Roman Empire sent out expeditions to find the source, and well, they completely failed. It wasn't until European explorers pushed deep into Africa in the 19th century that we even found the White and Blue Niles. But the mystery didn't end there. No way. In 2006, a British and New Zealand team claimed they found the true furthest origin deep in a forest in Burundi. Then flash forward to 2022, another team claimed a completely different starting point in Rwanda. So even today, pinpointing the absolute true origin of the Nile remains a highly debated scientific mystery. Crazy, right? And the mysteries hide beneath the surface, too. Okay, get ready for this. Geological records reveal a mind-blowing event roughly 5.5 million years ago known as the Messinian Salinity Crisis. Basically, the Mediterranean Sea entirely evaporated, and with it, the Nile River dried up completely, leaving behind this massive, empty canyon. Today, the river has parts that plunge 26 meters deep. To put that in perspective, that's roughly an 8-story building completely underwater. Archaeologists actually believe that hidden in those dark depths are ancient Egyptian temples, statues, and treasures that are still just waiting to be discovered. Section 2. Engineering the Mighty River. So let's jump to 1970. Egypt, with the help of the Soviet Union, completed an absolute engineering marvel, the Aswan High Dam. Now, it was designed to generate 40% of Egypt's electricity, control those historic floods we talked about, and provide year-round irrigation. The resulting reservoir, Lake Nasser, is actually one of the largest artificial lakes in the whole world. It was such a massive undertaking that UNESCO had to orchestrate this miraculous project to literally cut the ancient Abu Simbel temples into blocks and move them 65 meters higher just to save them from the rising waters. But here's the crucial point we have to talk about: the ecological trade-off. Remember that incredibly vital black silt that fertilized Egypt for 10,000 years? Well, it now gets completely trapped behind the dam. So farmers are forced to buy chemical fertilizers. And worse, without new sediment reaching the sea, the fertile Nile Delta is actively shrinking and literally sinking into the Mediterranean. As you can see, when we try to engineer nature, there's almost always a severe cost. Section 3. The looming water war. Right now, there is a highly complex geopolitical reality unfolding. Ethiopia is building a massive dam on the Blue Nile, which, remember, is the source of 85% of the river's water. Now, looking at this objectively, for Ethiopia, this dam represents vital national development and a renaissance. It promises 6,450 megawatts of much-needed electricity that could pull millions out of poverty. But for Egypt downstream, this is viewed as a direct existential threat. Egypt relies heavily on the Nile for the survival of its 100 million citizens, so any disruption in water flow could be catastrophic. And then you have Sudan, caught right in the middle, facing varying downstream impacts. The African Union has been stepping in to mediate, but this situation perfectly illustrates a really tough reality: how one nation's essential development can be another nation's existential threat. The stakes here literally couldn't be higher. Section 4. Climate Change and Survival. According to alarming data from the United Nations, because of rising temperatures, erratic rainfall, and the melting of the ice in the Ethiopian highlands, experts project that by 2050, the Nile River's water flow could be reduced by a staggering 50%. Just half the river left. This threatens the survival of over 300 million people right across the region. We are talking about severe food crises, absolutely decimated agriculture, and unimaginable humanitarian challenges. Before we wrap up, let's just quickly marvel at the incredible footprint of this river to remember exactly what the world stands to lose. Did you know Sudan actually has over 200 ancient pyramids along the Nile? That's right, more than Egypt does. The river also still moves over 90 million tons of silt annually. Its massive delta is visibly striking from outer space. Yet, coastal cities like Alexandria, sitting just 2 meters above sea level, are at massive risk of drowning as sea levels rise and that delta sinks. This is the very riverbank that birthed the first paper, papyrus, and the earliest sundials. Its cultural and geographical legacy is just completely unmatched. Which brings us to our final critical thought. The Nile is a river that gave birth to us, fed us, and guarded human civilization for thousands of years. But today, it's the one that needs our protection. So what does this all mean for us? Will humanity find a way to cooperate and save this vital lifeline, or will we end up fighting over what's left? It's a question the whole world should be watching very closely. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. If you found this journey as fascinating as I did, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. See you next time.